My name is Eleanor, I'm 58, and my husband told me I was old news at our 35th anniversary dinner, then handed me divorce papers. Before I tell you about how his phone started ringing off the hook the next morning, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The chandeliers in our sprawling mansion sparkled, casting a warm, almost deceptive glow over the lavish anniversary party. It was our 35th, Richard's and mine. 35 years. A lifetime, it felt like, distilled into this single, glittering evening. I moved through the crowd, a quiet presence in my pearl-colored silk dress, my eyes, accustomed to detail, scanning every corner. I checked on the caterers, made sure the champagne flutes were constantly refilled, ensured the orchid arrangements were perfectly aligned. Every element was meticulously planned, just as I had meticulously planned and executed the financial backbone of Vance & Company for over 3 decades. Richard, my husband, was, as always, the undisputed star. His charming smile, his perfectly coiffed silver hair, his booming laughter, he was the magnetic force pulling everyone into his orbit. He clapped a major business partner, Mr. Harrison, on the back, his voice carrying easily over the murmur of conversations. Eleanor handles the paperwork, you know. I handle the business. She's just a diligent bookkeeper, really. I built all this from the ground up. He gestured vaguely in my direction, a dismissive wave of his hand. Mr. Harrison nodded, a polite, slightly bored smile on his face. He probably didn't even register my presence. Isabel, my younger sister, stood beside Richard, her eyes glittering with a triumph that felt almost obscene. She was draped in a shimmering emerald gown, her laughter a little too loud, her hand resting a little too familiarly on Richard's arm. My parents, sitting in plush armchairs nearby, were beaming, basking in Isabel's reflected glory. Isabel is so clever, my mother cooed to a distant cousin. Always knew how to make the most of her opportunities. Unlike some. The some hung in the air, unspoken but clearly aimed at me. The dismissal of my role, the blatant favoritism, it was all so public, so ingrained in the fabric of my life. I just smiled, a faint, unreadable curve of my lips. My gaze drifted towards Richard's study door, a heavy, dark oak door that held secrets. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that a shocking truth was waiting to be uncovered behind it. The air around me felt suddenly heavy, charged with an unspoken tension, an impending shift. I remember those early days of Vance & Company so vividly. My wedding photo, still on the hallway table, showed a radiant, hopeful young woman, barely out of college, brimming with dreams. But the memories weren't all sunshine and roses. I, with my freshly minted Wharton finance degree, was the only one who saw the true potential in Richard's rough sketches of a construction business. He had the charisma, yes, but I had the numbers, the vision, the strategic mind. I was the one who pulled all-nighters, hunched over ledgers, researching market trends, building complex financial models that would make a lesser person's head spin. I was the one who tirelessly knocked on the doors of every bank, every investment fund, facing rejection after rejection, until I finally broke through. There was this one time, I was pitching our first major loan to a room full of skeptical bankers. My voice was steady, my arguments ironclad, my projections meticulously detailed. I could feel the weight of their doubt, but I pushed through, driven by a fierce belief in what we could build. Richard just sat there, smiling, occasionally interjecting with empty platitudes, nodding along as if he understood the intricate financial jargon I was weaving. They looked at him, the charming face, but they listened to me, the quiet voice of reason. I was the foundation. He was just the facade. I fought tooth and nail to build my own reputation with partners like Mr. Davenport from National Bank and Mr. Tanaka, the Japanese investor. They trusted me, not Richard, with their millions. They knew my name, Eleanor Vance, was synonymous with integrity and financial genius. Richard was just the frontman. I remember another scene, just 5 years ago, at a big industry awards gala. Richard was up on stage, accepting the Entrepreneur of the Year award. He stood there, beaming, basking in the spotlight, thanking my steadfast wife, Eleanor, who always kept the books in order. The whole room applauded, oblivious to the fact that I was the one who'd pulled the company back from the brink of bankruptcy after a disastrous project in Florida. I'd worked for months, restructuring debt, renegotiating contracts, practically living at the office, all while Richard was off playing golf. My parents, sitting in the front row, were only focused on Richard and Isabel, who was busy taking selfies with the award, her arm linked through Richard's. "Isabel is so supportive," my mother whispered to a neighbor, loud enough for me to hear. "Always there for Richard. So much more understanding than Eleanor." Maria, our housekeeper for 20 years, stood quietly in a corner, her eyes filled with pity as she watched me. She had seen it all, my sleepless nights, my quiet sacrifices, the constant dismissals. Later that night, Maria brought me a warm cup of herbal tea. "Madam, they don't see your worth," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "But I do. You built this. You are the rock." Maria's loyalty was a tiny beacon in my life of constant invalidation. Her words, simple as they were, had planted a seed of resilience deep within me. I knew then, I couldn't let this injustice continue. Not anymore. The accumulated slights, the years of being invisible, the constant undermining, it all formed a solid foundation for the core conflict that was about to erupt. I was pushed to my absolute limit. The soft strains of jazz music still drifted up from downstairs, a stark contrast to the chilling silence that hung heavy in Richard's study. I slipped inside, feigning a search for my misplaced phone, a flimsy excuse. My eyes, however, were immediately drawn to a stack of documents carelessly left on his mahogany desk, unlatched. The words "divorce petition, Vance versus Vance" screamed at me from the top page, stark and brutal, like a physical blow. My heart seized, a cold, hard knot forming in my chest, but my face remained an unreadable mask. I picked up the papers, my fingers tracing the cold, official print. Each page, each clause, felt like a fresh cut, severing a piece of my soul. The folder didn't just contain the divorce papers, already signed by Richard, just waiting for my signature. It held a detailed, cold-blooded plan to transfer full control of Vance and Company to him. And what truly made my breath catch, what sent a jolt of pure, icy fury through me, was Isabel's name. Her name appeared multiple times, not just as a beneficiary of some minor assets, but explicitly slated for the chief financial officer position, the very role I had silently, tirelessly, brilliantly held for 35 years. She, who knew nothing of corporate finance, who spent her days shopping and gossiping, was to take my place. Attached were first-class tickets to the Maldives for two, booked for next week, Richard and Isabel. A romantic getaway, a celebration of their betrayal, on the very week of our anniversary. And there was even a draft email, ready to be sent to partners in banks, announcing my retirement, filled with condescending remarks about my age and outdated methods. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. A cold dread washed over me, not from fear, but from a profound, visceral disgust. This wasn't just a romantic betrayal, it was a calculated scheme to steal my entire life's work, my worth, my very identity, my inheritance of a lifetime of dedication. Richard saw me as nothing more than an obstacle, a relic of the past to be discarded so he could flaunt his younger mistress, my own sister. He thought he could just erase me. But here's the thing, I didn't crumble. There were no tears. No sobs. The initial pain, sharp and searing, quickly hardened into a chilling, almost terrifying resolve. A quiet, burning rage settled deep within me. I carefully placed everything back exactly as I found it, every paper, every ticket, every damning detail, as if I'd never touched them. I knew I needed undeniable proof, something beyond a fleeting glimpse. I pulled out my phone, my hand steady despite the tremor in my soul, quickly snapping a few photos of the most crucial documents, the transfer plan, the flight tickets, the draft email. I made sure to capture every detail, every signature, every date, ensuring no trace was left behind. Then, I took a deep, fortifying breath, deleted the photos from my phone's gallery, and walked out of the room, my face an unreadable mask. A powerful, irreversible decision had solidified in my mind. I wouldn't break. I wouldn't let them walk all over me again. This was the final straw, the ultimate humiliation, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was time to act. My chilling calm was a harbinger of the storm about to break, a storm none of them, in their arrogant blindness, could possibly foresee. The party continued downstairs, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and false conviviality, but I was completely detached from it. I moved among the guests, offering polite smiles, my mind racing, dissecting every word, every gesture. I deliberately walked past Richard and Isabel, catching snippets of their excited chatter about the upcoming Maldives trip, about how Richard would restructure the company and how Isabel would bring fresh, young energy to the executive team. I barely suppressed a smirk. They were so utterly oblivious, so consumed by their own delusion of grandeur. I remembered every single clause in every financial contract I had personally negotiated, especially Clause 14b, a provision I had subtly, meticulously woven into every major company agreement from the very beginning, like an invisible safety net. It was a trump card only I knew about, a weapon I never thought I'd have to play, but one that was now primed and ready. As Richard and Isabel were busy preening, accepting compliments and basking in the glow of their perceived success, I drifted past an old family friend, Mrs. Henderson, a woman who had witnessed my tireless work from the company's inception, but was now gushing about Richard. "Richard is such a genius," Mrs. Henderson cooed, "to have built this empire all by himself. A true self-made man." I just smiled faintly, a tight, almost imperceptible smile. "Yes," I replied, my voice calm, "he's very good at making people believe that." The double meaning hung in the air, unnoticed by Mrs. Henderson, but a small, satisfying jab for me. Then I spotted Mr. Davenport, the esteemed chairman of National Bank, standing alone in a corner, nursing a glass of fine wine. He was a man of immense power and even greater integrity, a man who had always seen my true worth. I approached him, offering a warm, genuine smile. "Mr. Davenport, everything all right?" I asked, my voice betraying none of the turmoil within. "Excellent, Eleanor," he replied, his eyes full of genuine respect. "I was just thinking about you. I always trust your financial acumen. You're the only one I'd ever trust to handle the intricacies of major contracts like Mr. Tanaka's resort project. No one else could have pulled that off, truly." I nodded, a flicker of something triumphant in my eyes. I had planted the seed of truth, a small but profoundly significant detail that no one else in this room would understand the full implications of. The atmosphere in the room, for me, suddenly felt charged with an electric tension, as if everything was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable, explosive moment. Every polite smile, every casual conversation, felt like a ticking clock, counting down to the moment of reckoning. The clinking of champagne glasses echoed, a sharp, almost ominous sound, signaling the evening's pivotal moment. Richard, with a smug, arrogant grin plastered across his face, stood beside me, a champagne flute raised high. He looked directly at me, his eyes filled with a chilling contempt. "Thua qui six," he began, his voice booming, carrying easily across the hushed ballroom. 35 years is a long time. A very long time. And frankly," he paused, letting the words hang in the air, "it's time for a fresh start. A new chapter. Someone younger, more exciting, more vibrant." He then turned dramatically to Isabel, who stood nearby, her emerald gown shimmering, a triumphant smile on her face, her eyes challenging mine. "I'll be starting a new life with Isabel." He then, with a flourish, produced a folder of divorce papers, pushing them towards me across the small table, a sneer twisting his lips. "Your old news," he declared, his voice loud enough for every single guest to hear, every word a deliberate, public humiliation. "Sign them, Eleanor, and we're done." Finished. The entire ballroom fell into a stunned silence. The air crackled with unspoken shock. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, hushed and horrified. My parents, however, clapped softly, their faces alight with pride for Isabel, their golden child. Everyone, every single person in that room, expected me to break down, to cry, to collapse in a heap of tears and shame. But I just looked at Richard, then at Isabel, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. It was a smile that held no warmth, no humor, only a chilling, knowing calm. I picked up the pen, my fingers steady, my hand perfectly unyielding. And with a deliberate, unhurried motion, I signed the papers. "If that's what you want, Richard," I said, my voice eerily calm, so calm it made Richard and Isabel flinch slightly, a flicker of unease crossing their faces. My chilling composure momentarily unnerved them, but their arrogance quickly overshadowed any fleeting doubt. They simply assumed I had accepted my fate, that I was too old, too broken to fight back. Immediately after signing, I stood up, my posture regal, my composure unbroken. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I'm a little tired. Please enjoy the rest of the evening." I offered a polite, detached nod to the stunned guests, then quietly, gracefully, left the party, heading straight to my study. I closed the door behind me, the muffled sounds of the party fading into oblivion. I opened my laptop, the screen's blue light illuminating my face, highlighting the cold determination in my eyes. My fingers flew across the keyboard, swift and precise. I sent a single, pre-drafted email, attaching the photos of the damning documents I'd taken earlier. The subject line was stark: activate Clause 14B and initiate comprehensive inquiry. The recipients were Mr. Davenport, Mr. Tanaka, and the company's entire legal team. This wasn't just a simple email, it was a trigger, a meticulously planned detonation. Then, I turned off my phone, placed it on the desk, a silent, inert brick, and began systematically packing my bags. Each item was folded neatly, each cherished memento carefully placed in a box, as if I was packing away an old chapter of my life, preparing for a completely new one. The next morning, Richard and Isabel woke up, basking in the glow of their perceived triumph. They were already making giddy plans for their Maldives getaway, dreaming of a lavish, unburdened future. But then, Richard's phone began to ring incessantly, its insistent buzz shattering the fragile peace of their morning. "Call 1, Mr. Davenport, Chairman of National Bank." Richard, Mr. Davenport's voice was grim, devoid of his usual warmth. "Eleanor has activated the primary guarantor clause. Vance and Company's entire line of credit and all outstanding loans will be immediately frozen for review. We cannot continue to provide funding when the primary guarantor has withdrawn and there are serious irregularities concerning the collateral management. This is a complete shutdown until further notice." Richard's face went pale. He stammered, trying to placate Mr. Davenport, but it was useless. The line went dead. Immediately after, the phone rang again, a relentless, terrifying sound. "Call 2, Mr. Tanaka's lawyer." Mr. Vance, the lawyer's voice was crisp, formal, and utterly devoid of sympathy. "We've received notification from Ms. Eleanor. Our multi-million-dollar resort project contract includes a key personnel clause tied directly to Ms. Eleanor. With her departure, we are compelled to immediately suspend the project. This means the entire college fund for your children, tied to this project's success, is now in jeopardy. We will be seeking a new partner with the necessary competence and credibility, effective immediately." Richard felt his heart pounding against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of panic. He turned to Isabel, his face ashen, his eyes wide with disbelief. Isabel was equally ashen, her earlier triumph replaced by a growing terror. She had never imagined things could unravel so quickly, so catastrophically. "Call 3, company lawyer, Mr. Davies." "Richard, we have a major problem. All the assets pledged as collateral for the company's massive loans are held in a complex trust fund that Eleanor is the sole manager of. She has full discretion and has just issued a directive to freeze every single transaction. We can't access any assets, any funds, any capital without her signature. She wasn't just a bookkeeper, Richard, she was the true architect of our financial structure, the actual owner of every single cash flow, every single salary payment, every single inheritance fund. The company is effectively bankrupt." Richard, Isabel, and my parents, who had been so arrogant and self-satisfied just hours before, now burst into my study, their faces contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. They found me calmly pulling my last suitcase towards the door, ready to leave. "What have you done?" Richard shrieked, his voice raw with panic and fury, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The major twist, truth unleashed. I turned around, my face completely impassive, devoid of any emotion, my eyes cold and clear. "I just signed the divorce papers you gave me, Richard," I said, my voice eerily calm, each word a hammer blow. "You were the face, Richard, but I was the foundation. For 35 years, every bank, every investor, every major client worked with me. My reputation, my integrity, my financial genius, not yours, was what guaranteed this company. In every financial contract I ever signed, every loan agreement, every partnership deal, there was Clause 14b, if I, Eleanor Vance, were to leave the company, every single agreement, every single deal, every single financial obligation would be immediately nullified. The company you thought was yours, the empire you claimed to have built, was merely an empty shell, a house of cards constructed entirely on my name and my trust. And now, Richard, it has collapsed. Completely." The entire family froze, their faces a tableau of horror. Richard stood there, dumbfounded, his jaw slack, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Isabel began to sob uncontrollably, real tears streaming down her face, not from remorse, but from sheer terror at the realization that her lavish life, her dreams of inheriting a fortune, had just evaporated into thin air. My parents stammered, their voices trembling, their faces ashen. "Eleanor, you can't do this. This is family. You can't abandon us." My mother cried, reaching out, trying to grab my arm, her voice laced with a desperate plea. I gently pulled my arm away from her, my gaze unwavering, my eyes showing no hint of the pain they had inflicted for so long. "Family?" I repeated, my voice cold but heavy with meaning, cutting through the air like a sharp blade. Family turned their backs on me, humiliated me, exploited me for 35 years. Family celebrated my downfall. He wanted someone younger, a new life. Well, now he has it. I looked directly at Richard, my eyes showing no mercy, no pity. "You wanted a new life, Richard. Now you have it. Good luck with the mountain of debt and a company that's nothing more than a name on a crumbling facade." Just then, Maria entered the room, carrying my last suitcase. Her face was grim, but her eyes held a spark of quiet satisfaction. "The car is here, madam," she said, her voice gentle, her gaze full of profound affection for me, then sweeping over Richard and Isabel with a look of utter disdain. A sleek, black luxury car, a Mercedes, had pulled up to the mansion's grand entrance. The car door opened, and Mr. Davenport, the esteemed chairman of National Bank, stepped out. He walked towards me, his demeanor calm but radiating immense power. He approached, respectfully opening the car door for me, as if I were royalty, a queen departing her crumbling castle. "Everything is ready, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice full of deference, completely ignoring Richard and the others, as if they were invisible, irrelevant. I took one last look at my family, the people who had once been my whole world, now just ghosts of betrayal, their faces etched with despair. I felt no anger, no bitterness, no lingering resentment. Only an overwhelming emptiness and a profound, liberating sense of release. I stepped into the car, my head held high, not once looking back. As the car pulled away, I watched through the tinted window. I saw Richard collapse to the ground, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking, a broken man. Isabel was still sobbing uncontrollably beside him, her emerald gown now looking like a cheap, gaudy costume. My parents stood there, their faces ashen, stripped of their usual arrogance, their world having just imploded. I took a deep, cleansing breath, the first truly free breath I had taken in 35 years. I had drawn a permanent boundary, severed all toxic ties, and stepped into a new chapter of my life, unburdened and unbound. 1 year later. I sat in my new office, a penthouse suite in a gleaming skyscraper in downtown New York City. The morning sun streamed through the large, floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the minimalist yet elegant space. On my desk, instead of the chaotic stacks of Vance and Company financial reports, there was a sleek tablet and a few well-worn books on sustainable investing and community development. I had founded Eleanor's Legacy, a venture capital fund dedicated to supporting small businesses owned by women, especially those who had faced injustice or struggled to access capital. My focus was on providing not just funding, but also mentorship, strategic guidance, and a safe space for them to rebuild. Just last week, I'd helped a woman named Sarah, a brilliant architect who had lost her entire inheritance and her business in a messy divorce from a manipulative husband. He'd left her with nothing, not even enough to pay for her daughter's college fund. I didn't just give her money, I connected her with a top lawyer to fight for her rights, guided her through rebuilding her business plan, and helped her secure new contracts. Now, her firm is thriving, and her daughter is starting at an Ivy League university next fall. Another woman, Maria, a talented software engineer, had been systematically denied promotion after promotion at her old company because of subtle gender bias. I helped her negotiate a severance package, then invested in her startup. She's now building an app that helps women in tech find mentorship and support. One afternoon, Maria, who is now not just my housekeeper but my personal assistant, confidant, and dear friend, placed a cup of herbal tea on my desk. "Madam, Mrs. Jenkins just called. Her bakery had record sales this month. She wants to send you a dozen of her famous apple pies as a thank you." Maria smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling. Mrs. Jenkins was a middle-aged woman who had lost everything after her husband gambled away their life savings. I not only helped Mrs. Jenkins recover a portion of her assets but also guided her on how to manage her own finances and develop her small craft bakery into a thriving chain. I used my expertise and sharp financial acumen to empower hundreds of other women who needed a steady hand and a trusted voice to rise after their own personal storms. I helped one woman secure a college fund for her daughter after a bad divorce settlement. Another, I guided through a complex lawyer dispute over a promotion she was denied, ensuring she received the salary she deserved. Beyond work, I also made abundant time for myself. I joined a vibrant book club, started taking piano lessons, and even enrolled in a tango class, something Richard had always scoffed at as a waste of time. I reconnected with old friends whom Richard and his family had systematically alienated me from over the years. I rediscovered hobbies I had long abandoned, finding joy in simple pleasures. I realized that the financial control and power I wielded weren't just tools for retribution, they were the keys to my own liberation and to living a more fulfilling, meaningful life. I no longer had to prove my worth to anyone. The profound peace in my soul, the quiet joy in my everyday life, was the clearest testament to my victory. I felt truly free, wonderfully light, and absolutely energized to create positive change in the world around me. My life was finally, truly, my own. I stood by the large window in my new penthouse apartment, a serene oasis high above the bustling city, watching the vibrant sunset paint the Manhattan sky in hues of orange and purple. The journey had been long, arduous, and filled with unimaginable pain, but it had taught me invaluable lessons. It had taught me that true worth isn't found in the fleeting recognition of others, but in self-belief, resilience, and the unwavering courage to rise after being knocked down. The betrayal, the humiliation, the years of being invisible, they had once been chains, binding me, but now they had transformed into the very fuel that propelled me towards a more meaningful, impactful life, a life where I could use my strength and wisdom to uplift others. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. Everything had settled. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear, calm sky. I had found peace, not in bitter revenge, but in profound liberation and the boundless ability to create a future entirely on my own terms, unburdened by the shadows of the past. I stepped onto the spacious balcony, breathing in the cool evening air, the scent of possibility filling my lungs. My gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, where the first stars began to twinkle, tiny beacons of hope in the vast expanse of the night sky. I was no longer the old news left behind, discarded and forgotten. I was a new star, radiant and free, ready to shine brightly, guiding others, and embarking on an entirely new, exhilarating chapter of my life. Thank you so much for watching my story. I truly hope it resonated with you, and perhaps, gave you a little bit of strength. Have you ever faced a similar situation where you had to reclaim your worth, your voice, or your life? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if you found strength or inspiration in my story, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more. Your support means the world to me.